Out the window.
Hi everyone. It's super great to be here. I am born and raised in Astoria, Queens. I grew up on 24th Street between 35th, 34th Avenue. It feels amazing to be here. Socrates Sculpture has for me been a super formative and amazing place growing up, and so to be here is another dream come true. I think 13-year-old me would be really proud to be here and telling my story. Coming back to Astoria as a 28-year-old feels pretty, I think, full centering and as a full circle. There definitely has been a lot of growing pains growing up here for various reasons, but I'm happy to be here, happy to be home, and I really do believe in the statement that I am Astoria, and Astoria is also me, and my family's history also makes the story as well. So a really big part of that story is centered around my parents' small businesses. My mother has had a hair salon for the past 20 years in a couple of locations, and right now she's on 29th Street and 35th Avenue. And my dad, who no longer has a shop, but he used to run a sign and awning shop on Crescent and 34th. So they're all relatively close, not far from here. And I think that's the way in which I saw my upbringing here in Astoria was centered around as an immigrant kid who used to have to work shifts or have to work hours in those two places and have even at one point even lived in one of them for a little bit. My parents migrated here from Bolivia in the 80s. My dad is an artist. He actually, before coming here, he actually worked as a busboy at Gables, which is on 31st and Broadway, right by the train station. It's like an Italian restaurant that is no longer there. And he hated it. He really hated having to have a job where he had to clock in and he had to kind of have someone to report to. He just never, even later on and having his own business as a sign maker, even worked for big companies that did signs for H&M and Bloomingdale's, and he just hated it. He just never liked it. He was a subway performer before my parents settled down. He just did his own thing, and so obviously once they had me, they're like, well, we have to kind of, you have to kind of, get a job or figure something out. So he opened his own business on 34th and Crescent. And it was a small little shop. That is where I remember many summers rollerblading around that block. And we had a little car that was battery operated that we actually can get inside. I could get inside, and I would ride around the block, and people would know me. And just hanging out, just literally running around the block with the kids that lived on that block as well, on Crescent. It was awesome. And later on, my mother, who had worked jobs and as a nanny, and she then in a factory, she that were really heavy and labor intensive, decided to open up her salon on Crescent as well. So and so they both had this really big shop, and the shop growing up was, I think at that time I probably was 8 or 9, was enormous. So salon was called Yester Studio, and my dad being an awning maker, and he did neons, he did T-shirts, he did interiors, he did everything. And so literally they had the space. The front of it was a salon. It had neons all over. It had 2 double floors. It was a really modern, sort of very 90s style place. And then once you kind of went through the back, it was a small office that actually we even lived in the year that we were moving out of Astoria, because the rent was a little ridiculous for us to pay before as I tried to fix up the house that they had bought in Elmhurst, where I live now. And then I would go into the back of the shop, and that was my dad's shop. So immediately it would become dust, and you would hear metal being cut and sawed, and it was just my dad's equipment, and it was just this other world, I guess, beauty salon, and then this kind of shop, and then in the basement, which is my dad's office. So it was, for me as a kid, was just it was literally like a playground, where I was also very familiar with things like plexiglass, and I was very familiar with things like hair disinfectant, because I grew up around that, and I would spend at one point I didn't have a babysitter, so that I would be there. So I was, for a kid, it was very it was very, it was just like, okay, well, I know what this is. When I got to like 12, I started to have to work in the salon, having to work at that cashier, having to wash hair, having to, you know, do the towels and making sure they're... So I had, and I think by then I was definitely over it. I definitely was like, why am I here? I don't want to be here. Like, I'd rather be outside. I'd rather be hanging out with people. But I was a kid who would like actually take a lot of walks. And I think one of the beautiful things about Astoria is that there's a lot of like nooks, like kind of nooks and streets. You can kind of walk and it's like residential. You kind of get lost. And I would have my Discman and listen to music. We would hang out with my friends at Uno's, which is by the theater. Uno's is still there, and the theater, Kaufman, that was like the spot in 2000, 2001, and 2. So, and I would come here a lot also and literally just sit and just like take pictures and write and just do that. So being away from the salon for me was like the best. I was like, I don't know why I'm here. So, and also, you know, the salon also, why it was such a central part of my life. It also was hard because there was a lot of my parents had a very rocky marriage, and a lot of center was around money issues and bills and rent and whatnot. So a lot of arguments, a lot of just also having to also be very open about that, and having this being awake in that sense. So I was happy to kind of step away from that. We moved away. We moved into Elmhurst in 2005. I kind of, you know, focused on school and other things. And my mother had to move to a separate location on Broadway and 32nd. And she was there. And then 3 years later, the landlord of the shop never renewed her lease. And we're like, okay, that's fine. Like, he'll eventually do it. It's fine. And he never renewed her lease for another 2 years. And out of the blue, had said, hey, so there's some folks that are interested in the space. The net restaurant next door, which was called Mundo, I don't know if it was a pretty popular spot back then. They were heading out, and so they kind of want to rent the space together. And you know, she had no lease, so it was super possible that daunting fear of like getting evicted was very real. And eventually then came the day where they're like, so they're going to sign the lease and you have to be out of here by next week. And my dad was not in the country. It was my sister and myself and my mother. And so it literally was all hands on deck, getting everything out of the salon, this new space she was in. The humiliation also of her having to literally not getting her deposit back, and then kind of being like, I did you a favor by letting you be here. There are no protections against small businesses. And so, and a salon, I think, and I didn't say this earlier, but that salon, aside from me maybe not seeing the magic of it, but it actually really was people. I was there since I was like a little girl, and so people would know who I was, know my mother. People would know each other. Walking on Broadway, they would see, oh, hey, you're so-and-so, and we would be stopped constantly. So there was that community feeling that a beauty salon, I think, creates and evokes. And so when she had to move, people actually came out and helped out to move, and loading her stuff in the car and whatnot. So fortunately, you know, and it was also hard for her as someone who her business, I think, was a central part of her life. And she, you know, she's like, well, I don't know, I don't know if I will continue. Maybe I'll have to work from the house. I'll have to rent a chair. I don't know what I'm going to do. And fortunately, she found a spot on 35th, the one where she's now, because the person who had a space was an accountant. He didn't need a big space for a whole year. She was like, I can rent you half the space. and we can split it. And so they did, and they've been making it work since, and it's a really hilarious relationship. That's their story. But I guess comes to say that thinking about, and also having, I think, coming back to the place of like being more aware of the importance of small businesses, of the importance of these spaces and how important it is to preserve them in this community. Something that Duane Reade's and Starbucks can never replicate, ever. And I think being cognizant of where you shop and who you support. It's true, maybe these places don't have Wi-Fi or credit card readers, which even for me is like a burden sometimes when I'm also navigating other neighborhoods. But knowing that, as folks evoked earlier, they're much of the fabric of this neighborhood and the history and the memories of the neighborhood. Acknowledging histories is really important. And so she's here, but she's also here by a thread, because once her lease expires, where will she go? We don't know. And so, but I'm happy to be here telling this story. And I hope if y'all need a haircut, you can go to her salon, because it's still there. Thank you very much.
Now I put down roots on shifting sands, but avalanches keep on washing me down. Down to the river, back to the start, out to the wide blue ocean coast. Now I put down roots on shifting sands, but avalanches keep on washing me down. Down to the river, back to the start, out to the wide blue ocean coast. I turn back around 'cause I'm heading right for the source. Go down to the river and back to the start, out to the wide blue ocean coast. I turn back around 'cause I'm heading right for the source.